At the heart of your board search strategy is going to be your business networking strategy. It is critical that you understand that 90% plus of board roles come about through business networks. It comes about via your business reputation. It comes about because you're showing up in the right places, connecting in with the right people, and people are vouching for you. You have raving fans. You have people who are champions for you behind the closed doors. You really have to take a new approach to this, because most senior executives have come up through the ranks of a corporate environment and will have quite a decent network at the C-suite level or executive director level, but they'll often be lacking with their board director network. And this is where you're going to have to take a fresh approach, because you're going to have to come up with a mechanism to come into contact with chairs, non-executive directors, and committee members on a regular basis. Now, you might use your LinkedIn as part of that approach to reach out and forge meaningful relationships, and you might use your thought leadership as part of that strategy to connect in with new people. But the key to building long-term relationships and rapport with people will be meaningful meetings, one-on-one meetings with the right people. Now, when I talk to clients and they're disappointed about their results, they're disappointed about whether or not they're securing board roles, inevitably, if we look at how many people they've met with in the month preceding, it's very limited. There's just not enough in-person meetings. There's not enough video calls. There's not enough connection happening. And the numbers are just so low that the strike rate is just never going to get there. And this is really going to be at the heart of your strategy going forward. You need to forge a new network of board directors, and it's got to be consistent. And so consistency is really going to be the key for you. What are you doing week on week, month on month to connect in with the right people? Now, I personally would be using my thought leadership on platforms like LinkedIn to bring me into contact on a regular basis with chairs and non-executive directors. And I'd be talking about topics that keep the board of the directors awake at night. That would be an obvious place to play. But I would also be leveraging all of my physical networking opportunities. And, I think, the reality is it's hard yards. It's a lot of commitment. It's going to events at night when you probably don't feel like going. And it's pretty easy not to turn up. And I've been, I'll be honest, I do it probably like everybody does it. I make a commitment, I'm going to go to that event, and then at the last minute I pull out because I'm tired or I don't want to do it or I can't be bothered. But 90% of success in life is showing up, turning up, and pushing yourself to go to those meetings. And I read a little bit of advice late last year about not cancelling meetings, not cancelling events, and that had really furthered that individual, taking them forward in life. And I think there's a lot of common sense where that's concerned. So you've got to be committed, and especially if you're an aspiring board director, this is a journey. You are going to really be embracing networking. So for me personally, I'm going to think about the clubs, the networking groups. Where do I need to go to come into contact with chairs and non-execs? So I would be on the invite list for big four functions, your accounting firms, your law firms. I'd be going to legal briefings, for example. I go to a lot of events where I'm being briefed about legislative change. So that brings me into contact with business owners, chairs, non-execs, committee members, specialists in these areas. So that's an obvious place to play. I do a lot of work in the private equity venture capital sort of sector. So I'm, sort of always involved with the Australian Investment Council. I'm connecting in with private equity events. I'm always raising capital, so it brings me into contact with people. So I use that a lot to further my connections. And then I've got to think about the reality of how the game works. And I think about, well, where do the business owners sit. They are often involved in charities, they're often involved in business events, they're often involved in capital raisings, they're often involved at high net luxury events. So I'll often go to things like the racing or the polo or wine events and the like, because I'm going to come into contact with business owners. So I've got a number of organisations that I map out each year, and I make sure I go to at least a few events each quarter. Each month, I think as an executive who's aspiring to serve in this space, you would be doing something month on month, at least 2 physical events, and then you might have your virtual events, and you'd be using your LinkedIn to do the Clayton's networking, to do the follow-up and the connection. You've got to think of strategies that would enable you to keep in touch, and that's where, often, it's a real challenge to sort of keep the rapport going. And so that's where the thought leadership piece can come in handy, because you can follow up and say, I just wrote this recent article on ESG and how it's going to impact the board of directors. You might be interested. It helps keep you top of mind. People are often watching my videos, so it keeps my presence being felt in the board director community. So I think you've got to think of some strategic ways to show up, and you've really got to be very targeted with your networking, because you can't just do everything for everyone. You can't be out at every event. You can't be, doing 24/7 networking. So you've got to be quite laser sharp with the networking, and that's where the clarity comes. If you're clear on what your strategy is, if you're clear on your value proposition, you're clear on who your targets are. So month on month, I would be writing down who are the top 10 people I want to connect with this month, who are the boards that I'm following, who are the members of those boards that I need to connect in with. So for example, I'd love to be on the board of Guide Dogs. I've mapped out that organisation. I've mapped out the board members. I've connected with the vast majority of those board members, and they invite me to events, and I come into contact with people in a very natural, authentic way. That is how you secure these appointments. Okay, so it's all through the networks. Also keep in mind that nobody secures a board role or a piece of business without being endorsed or recommended by somebody. And you've got to pay it forward. You've got to thank your network. You've got to be reciprocal. You've got to go back and follow up with people. I can't tell you how many times I've placed people onto boards and you don't even get a thank you. I think the nature of business and some good manners has really gone astray, and it is so rare these days for me to get a bottle of champagne or a thank you or a thank you note. It really is in the single digits. Whereas in years past, everyone used to thank you if you gave them a piece of business or you secured them a great role or you helped them get connected. And so I'm not just speaking from my own personal perspective. I think a lot of people will feel like this. They'll feel a little bit, well, I helped you. Where was the thank you? So you really have to recognise your champions and who is helping you secure board roles and who is helping you through this process. And you need to go back and keep them informed and thank them. And, it doesn't take much. It's very, very simple. It's very simple 101 business basics, but you'd be surprised how few people do it. And of course, you can stand out from the crowd if you do it consistently and just be really professional about it. Again, separate out from amateur hour, become a true professional, thank people for their help and their efforts. So as we go forward, you are going to obviously need the power of your network. You're going to need the power of referrals, and you're going to need champions. And I have 2 or 3 quality people in my life who are basically my champions, who love me, think I'm great, have done good work with each other, think very fondly of my business practices, and will go into bat for me at a moment's notice. And you need people like this who are talking behind the closed doors, recommending you, referring you, sending business your way. It is crucial, and you have to really nurture those relationships because they're so key. So I really encourage you to think about how you could operate in this area and to build out those strategic networks. At the end of the year, you want to be able to look back and see that there's at least 300 to 500 new connections that you've been able to forge, and you've forged meaningful relationships that you could actually follow up and call upon that person. Now, that's not unrealistic in the course of 365 days. It is possible. So, that's really where you want to be aiming. And I think every day you should be thinking about how you get connected, how do you expand your network, how do you give back to that network and reciprocate so that it becomes a powerhouse. And that really has been the key to my success. I've invested in the network for a very long time, and it comes through in kind because the consistency is there and the reputation is there. So really give it some serious thought, and I want you to write down the top 10 people maybe in your network today, how you're going to nurture those relationships, and who do you want to be connected with in the next 6 to 12 months, and start to really map this out so that you can be successful and really harness the power of your business networks during your board search.